Welcome to Conversations on the Coast, the Bay Area's premier author interview program. Today we're going to talk about something I've never talked about before. We're going to talk about an artist whose medium is wood, one of the great woodworkers of all time. The name of the book is the name of the artist, Sam Maloof, and its subtitle is 36 Views of a Master Woodworker. The author who is with us today is Fred Setterberg, and the book is published by Heyday over in Berkeley in collaboration with the Sam and Alfreda Maloof Foundation of Arts and Crafts. Thank you for coming by.
Thank you.
For some of those who have never heard of Sam Maloof, a couple of identifying things. He's the first craftsman to receive a MacArthur Foundation Genius Award.
Right.
What took him so long?
It took the MacArthur Foundation so long?
Yeah.
Well, Sam won the award in 1985.
Yeah,
and, right?
yeah.
They'd been up for, not less than a decade, I think. But I think maybe the question is what has taken art critics so long to regard
to recognize this form.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Sam was really the guy who, in a lot of ways, Sam and George Nakashima, they really closed that perception that craft was somehow another animal from art.
And lower.
Lower, exactly. Sam famously had a business card that said Sam Maloof, woodworker, right? It didn't say Sam Maloof, woodworker, designer, artist, sculptor, and many other things that you might care to say.
Yeah.
And he was really determined to emphasize that what he did was a craft with all the demands of craft, that you had to learn the skill in your hands as well as your head. But it didn't mean that he was naive at all about the fact that he wasn't a very creative artist. And he had a tremendous eye. One of his friends told me that they would often go to galleries and museums, and Sam could walk in the door and he would turn his head like a turret, and he would see the most interesting piece in the room and go immediately to it.
Oh, my God. Wow. That's a really nice fellow to go through.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, a fellow by the name of Jimmy Carter has called Sam the best woodworker that ever lived. And he says some other nice things as well about his morality, about his working hard and all that kind of stuff. And it turns out that Jimmy does furniture also.
Yeah, President Jimmy Carter was also a woodworker for most of his life. He told me, I talked to him at the Carter Center in Georgia, and he told me that he had begun making furniture when he was an officer in the Navy. And he and his family, his wife at that time, would move into unfurnished apartments, and he would make the furniture. And when when he left the White House, his staff and cabinet wanted to give him a going-away present. So the word got to him that they were going to give him a Jeep, and he didn't want a Jeep. So he said to his secretary, really, I'd like to have a wood shop fully equipped and get back to this. And that's what he did. He told me that for the next 2 years, he spent almost all of his time making furniture. It was a way to recuperate from that loss, which it was felt very deeply. And it was something that he loved to do. So he knew Sam by reputation. He told me that, President Carter told me that he had all of Fine Woodworking magazine, really the periodic Bible of woodworkers, a really fine magazine. And so he had all these pieces about Sam in Fine Woodworking. He knew his work. And when Sam sent a rocking chair, really Sam's signature piece, to the White House when President Carter was still in office, the White House had to say, thanks, but we can't accept anything over $100 in terms of a gift. So when President Carter left, Sam put the rocking chair in his car, and he drove more than 2,000 miles from Alta Loma, California, down in San Bernardino County, out to Plains, and gave it to the president.
Oh, my.
And it was the beginning of this very, very warm friendship.
Wow.
So, when I spoke to President Carter, he said to me that right off, he said, Sam was one of the most important people in my life. I almost had a brotherly feeling with him. And he was an example for me about how to live. And I thought, really? This is astounding. You were president of the United States. You won the Nobel Prize. But he admired Sam's work as an artist, as
Yes.
a woodworker. But some of the things that you were alluding to, that he saw lessons for life in Sam's approach to craft, a willingness to do what needed to be done to bring you as close as you can to perfection, while also keeping in mind, I think, that perfection is always impossible to achieve.
Not quite there, always beyond your reach.
I think there's sort of a religious overtone in that for President Carter and perhaps also for Sam, that you try as hard as you can, but we are, imperfect human beings, and so that's the best we can hope for is to do the best that we can.
When I was reading about that in the book, my first thought was Plato. And, the ideal being, the ideal existence or essence.
Yes.
Always to be striven for and don't expect to get there.
I think that's great. Yeah, I love that idea. And I brought that up to a couple of people that Sam worked with for many years in the shop and say, wasn't Sam sort of pursuing the Platonic ideal of a chair of wood?
Yeah.
And they said, well, Sam wouldn't say so.
No, he wouldn't call it that.
No. If he's just going to put woodworker on his card, there won't be any conversations about Plato here.
None.
No.
But he did do something that was a little different, at least in my mind. He was not a solitary genius.
No.
For him, being an artist meant that you were part of a community and kind of expressed that in your work.
This is the essence of the man, I think. You could imagine a woodworker could hole up in his shop forever, and that's what he would love to do. That's what would lead him there. But in fact, Sam was the most gregarious of all artists. One person told me that he always strived to make every customer a friend.
Wow. Oh, there's a lot of different ideas that come up in Sam Maloof, and we're going to look at some of them. So stay with us.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Follow us on Twitter at JimFosterCoc or send an email to jimfostercoc@gmail.com.
Sam Maloof, 36 Views of a Master Woodworker. That's the book we're talking about today, and we're talking with the author, Fred Setterberg. The book is published by Heyday in collaboration with the Sam and Alfreda Maloof Foundation for Arts and Crafts. I did it better that time than I did the first time, so I guess I'm getting there. I'd like to share with the audience somewhat the full or a fuller version of the Carter comment on Maloof. He was not just the best woodworker that ever lived, said Jimmy Carter. He was a person admirable in all his characteristics. He was a philosopher. He was deeply committed to moral values. I really have been inspired by Sam. And you said off mic that between the two of them, a friendship grew.
Yeah, it was really an authentic friendship. The Carters would visit and eat with Sam and his family when they were in Southern California. The Maloofs would stay with and eat with the Carters there in Georgia. I was astonished that I got to speak with President Carter. I'd never interviewed a president. And after the 30 minutes, this precious 30 minutes I had with him, I left his office, and his secretary said to me, Sam Maloof, it's his favorite subject.
Oh, how neat. How neat. I think in a sense that many of the 36 contributors saw Maloof's pieces as furniture art.
Mm-hmm.
And what does when does furniture become art? Is there a sense of that you got working with these people and their impressions of Maloof?
Yeah, you know what I heard really clearly from the people who worked with Sam in the shop and some of his closer friends was that he was really determined that every piece of art that he made be for use as well. So there's a famous story that one of his pieces was in a museum. You know, he's collected at the Met in New York and Boston Museum of Fine Arts and a number of museums and then many, many private collections. But there was an exhibit at a museum, and one of his chairs had been roped off so that you could walk by and admire and look at it. So what he did was he took that little cordon down and sat in the chair to drive home the point, this is what this is about.
Did he get arrested?
He did not, but they did take the cord down. And I was in the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston last week, and I saw a settee there, and we had been wandering through the museum for a couple of hours, and right next to it was a sign that said, "Please sit." So the spirit had been conveyed.
Yeah. One of the great things about your book, I think, is the number of different stories you get to tell. Like the story of Father Peter Riley, his church and its cross. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, Father Peter's parish was doing a renovation, a major job, and he knew Sam's work. He lived in the area there, so he wanted something very special to commission this great woodworker to make a number of the pieces that would be on the altar. And he told me that he loved sitting down and talking with Sam, but it seemed that the conversations never ended.
It never got to, well, we'll start building so date.
No.
Whatever piece is necessary.
Because there's always a story. There's another story to tell. And he told me then, Father Peter, that what he finally realized once they had signed the contract and they felt themselves in accord, they could feel kind of a friendship bond and been established, then Sam worked very, very quickly. And he thought that, in fact, what this was about was before he began work, he wanted to know who this person was who was going to benefit from it. Mm-hmm. And he then surprised everybody, astonished everybody, by including an enormous cross that was not part of the bargain.
Not in the contract. not in the contract. And the two of them then, apparently, if I read it correctly, got into a discussion and an understanding of a story about a cross that came in from the forest and mystically bore the sufferings of the Christ, so that the cross and the Christ became one and the same, and that's what Sam was thinking of.
Yeah, it seemed to come out of a conversation that they had had about a Middle English poem, something that's not the topic of everyday conversation, but that's where their conversation went.
I haven't had one in weeks.
This is the first I've had in a while. Yeah.
And so the cross does, and then the cross fit. I mean, it doesn't totally dominate.
No, it's an extraordinary piece of work. It's where your eye goes first when you walk into the church. It's just that it was a complete surprise to everybody who was involved in the renovation. And there was some resistance initially. This was not our plan. But because Sam's work is so beautiful, there's the words that people use to describe his work is it's sensuous, it's warm, it beckons you to touch it. It's also, in terms of the furniture, surprisingly comfortable. The design itself looks like it, maybe had its early origins in arts and crafts and moved through Scandinavian modern until it slowly becomes the unmistakable Maloof design. But this is hard wood he's working with. And I've now been lucky enough to sit in a lot of this furniture. And, I'm a big guy who's basically uncomfortable most of the time when I'm sitting in a chair. And that's not true for these. He managed to sculpt these chairs and settees in a way that it seems like they fit everybody and every body. And people don't have these objects in their house just as art objects to admire. They're beautiful. You can't keep your eyes off them, but they also are very practical. And Sam urged people to use them for everyday use. Somebody told me that he used to let his own dog sit in the chairs. If there's a problem, he has a shop. You can sand them, you can repolish, you can make them good again.
What an attitude! What a wonderful attitude!
Yeah.
No, it's art. It's beautiful. It's been used in a very creative way, and sit in it.
Right.
Sit in it. I love it. You know, when we come back, I'd like to talk to you about a man that I feel is very important to the Sam Maloof story, a fellow by the name of Lindell Marsh.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Follow us on Twitter at Jim Foster COC or send an email to jimfostercoc@gmail.com.
We are fortunate today to have Fred Setterberg sitting here in our studio talking to us about his latest book, Sam Maloof, 36 Views of a Master Woodworker, published by Heyday Press and the Sam and Elfrida Maloof Foundation for Arts and Crafts. That's a lot of work, you know. It's a great book, but and all that, and a wonderful package too. The way it's put together, the repro job on the full color pics, it's a very, very nice book.
Yeah, the designer Ashley Ingram did a fantastic job designing the book.
Glenn Adamson, who's the Nanette Latman Director, Museum of Arts and Design, said rewarding this book is, not just for those who knew Maloof and his work, but for anyone who places value in a life devoted to skill and artistry. And I think that's right. Who decided, which 36 cats to collar?
You know, that was a tough choice because since we were talking about the most gregarious of artists, it could have been 72 views of Sam Maloof. Yeah. I worked very closely with the folks at the Sam and Elfrida Maloof Foundation and Jim Rawish in particular, and they were just the ideal collaborators. So they would point me towards folks that we should think about. We would discuss, how the balance was going, where else we needed to go. We could have spent another year on it and had it be even fatter because there were a lot of folks who just, they loved this man and they wanted to talk about him. They wanted to talk about why he was important in their life.
And the sense of different perspectives really comes through.
Oh, good.
Really comes through. Nice job. The one that I like the most involves a fellow called Lindell Marsh. The title of the chapter is The Deal. Lindell Marsh is a lawyer specializing in environmental law and land environmental law. And he first met Maloof in 1969. Now, I chuckle at that because when they really had to work together like crazy is many years later.
Right. Yeah, it's a really good example of that dictum I was talking about before, that Sam wanted to make every customer a friend. So Lindell actually had been a customer who became a friend, and then at a crucial point was Sam's lawyer. What had happened was Sam, in addition to being this extraordinary furniture maker, over 30 years, he sculpted this amazing woodworker's home. He started with what he called an 800-square-foot dingbat bungalow, and over those years, he built it into 22 rooms, really with like a sculptor in wood. And it was there, unlike his furniture, which evolved slowly, you saw in his house these abrupt and radical changes. So it's a house, you've never been in a house like this. And in 1990, the state legislature, California state legislature, put aside the funds, allocated the funds to run a freeway straight through Sam's house. And it was going
literally straight through.
It was going to destroy one of the really great homes in the country.
Sure.
years of negotiations began, with Lindell being a key actor in those negotiations. What happened eventually, in the course of these many years, and in the course of a lot of goodwill from all parties involved, was that they decided that because Sam was an artist of such significance, that it made sense to move his house 2.5 miles east, right under the San Gabriels, dismantle it board by board, brick by brick, and reconstruct it. And so that's why the Sam and Alfredo Maloof Foundation for the Arts and Crafts, they come into being at this point. The house moves into they own it now.
Right.
Sam continues to live in it for the rest of his life. And Sam died 9 years ago. This year is his centennial, 2016. But now people can come and tour the house twice a week on Thursdays and Saturdays, I think. And some of the tours actually are led by woodworkers who worked for years with Sam. So you have the most intimate connection with the shop, with the furniture, and with the house as it was being created. Because Sam's assistants also were the guys who did most of the work inside the house.
My gosh. Wow. What a nice package.
It is. It's an amazing package, yeah. And it's now on the National Register of Historic Places. It's part of this artist studio program with a handful of American artists like George O'Keeffe and Jackson Pollock, where you can go and visit their homes.
Right. One of, 20 or so?
That's right.
Yeah. One of the things, getting back to my friend, Lindell Marsh, one of the ways that this thing got done and the house and stuff eventually got moved was because he refused to allow the people involved negotiate. He didn't want that word used. He wanted instead collaboration in governance, not litigation. And that's actually what happened.
Yeah.
And they had an incredible thing going on. At one point, there were over 40 people at the table talking about what are we going to do with this freeway coming through.
Right, which sounds like it would be a nightmare, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But like I say, the sense of goodwill on the part of the parties involved allowed people to not just assert their interests, I want my project to get done, but to think more collaboratively, to think just as Lindell was aiming for, to see we want the best conclusion possible. We don't know what that conclusion is yet. Let's hang in with the ambiguity and the uncertainty and see where we go. And, it was a slow drift for a number of years. Lindell had said that if he had come in at the beginning and said, look, I've got the answer, let's dismantle the house for an immense sum of money and recreate it and buy new property, no one was going to go for that.
No, they would have said, forget it.
Yeah.
Forget it. Won't work.
That's right.
Won't happen.
We'll run the freeway through.
Yeah.
But in fact, as people got to know each other and they saw the value in all things, the necessity of that freeway, the irreplaceability of that home, and Sam's importance still as an artist,
yeah,
they could move together to a place that one person could have never gone.
So the big move is made, and you write that the move of his home and other structures left Sam recently widowed and bereft as a man might be. They had ripped up the evidence of his life by the roots, shipped and reassembled the pieces a worldly 2.5 miles away, and now everybody expected him to somehow grow into whatever came next.
Right. The extraordinary thing is that he did. He was in his 80s. He had spent his entire life, raised his family in the citrus grove, about 6 acres, where he had built this home. And to be uprooted at that time in life was excruciating. One of the great ironies is that this very painful episode in his life is what gives us the possibility now to see his home, to see how he worked in perpetuity.
Because of the creation of the foundation, which came
Exactly,
along.
Yeah.
Well, there's another great thing out there. It's a book, Sam Maloof, 36 Views of a Master Woodworker by Fred Setterberg. This has been Conversations on the Coast, and I'm Jim Foster.
Follow us on Twitter at Jim Foster COC or send an email to jimfostercoc@gmail.com.